Well, with respect to the idea that the issue is mainly politicians, and that what they really need to do is we need to get honest people. Once we get honest people, but what are they implementing? So you have dishonest people and they do certain things, and maybe there's some corruption or something like that. And once we weed that out and we just have an honest person, that's really what we need. But suppose you did have an honest person. What are they implementing? And if what they're implementing is socialism, you're going to have one type of society. And if they're honest and what they're implementing is capitalism or a free market or something like that, you're going to have a very different kind of society. So it's not right to just say what we need is honest people. Ayn Rand defines capitalism in a really interesting way, and I'd never heard this at all before until I read Ayn Rand. She defines it not just as the system in which all private property, or all property is privately owned, but she defines it as it's the system that's based on the principle of individual rights. And so it's a system based on a particular kind of moral principle, or moral political principle. And it's the idea, it's a moral principle that every individual has the right to live his own life according to his own judgment, and he's left free to function in that regard so long as he respects the rights of others to do the same. Now that's a very abstract, philosophical sounding perspective. I haven't talked about economics or money or capital or investment or finance or entrepreneurship. It's a system that's based on that. But the system that you get based on that is, if you're really going to respect individual rights, you're going to need a government whose role is not to take people's earnings and spend it how they see fit. The idea is that if you have property rights, you have property rights. So the government's role then is simply to protect your right to protect your freedom or your ability to pursue your own values and to keep the products of your effort, and to trade with others. And at the end of the day, it's a very minimal sort of role. Historically and philosophically, it was an enormous achievement to get to the point in human society where you even can grasp the concept of a right. It's one thing to grasp the concept of a permission, like it's a kind of a cutout, like the king or the state has all the power and it owns everything and it commandeers everything. And a lot of the early struggle to get away from that absolute kind of rule was, whether it's the aristocracy or whichever it is let's get the king to agree to a certain kind of cutout or permission to, this area will just be ours. We'll get to agree and make decisions about this, and they eventually got that sort of thing. And you get some of these from the Magna Carta and so on. And that was a huge achievement. But it's still an issue of a grant. I mean, a grant or a permission can be revoked.
To you.
Yeah, and it's not something that's based on facts about human nature. It's about trying to carve out a sphere where we're not operating by permission. We're operating by right, if you want to think about it that way, or you're operating by it's our sphere. And in effect, that's what rights ultimately are. They're spheres of freedom. But Rand doesn't regard them as granted by the government. They're not permissions. They're protected by a proper government. They're protected, but they're not granted by the government. But nor does she think that rights, they just exist in nature, or that they're granted to us by God. It's still a grant. So she doesn't have I guess what she would put it as a mystical foundation, like a supernatural, divine issue. It's not something we're granted by God, and it's not something we're granted by the government. To grasp the concept of rights is to understand certain things. It's a kind of understanding. It's to understand certain things about how human beings need to live if they're going to live together in society. So it's an intellectual achievement. So you have to think, well, how do human beings function, and what does their proper survival look like? They have, and that takes a lot of thought too. It's like to grasp that reason, your ability to think, is really your means of survival. I mean, if you look around, so we're in a hotel room, if you look around, everything in here is the product of human thought, of reason, of grasping and understanding the nature of things and understanding causal connections. None of this stuff grows on trees. And almost, I mean, there's a breeze blowing and maybe a stream. Maybe you can eat some grass. I mean, this is basically nothing that's offered. And everything else you see around you is the product of reason. And our view is that reason is the faculty that needs to remain free in a society. Because otherwise, how else do you get this stuff? Yeah. And so it's about carving out areas where you're free to function here, to live your life. And that involves a whole lot of activities. But in those activities that you need to live your life, those are the spheres of freedom where people, no one can trespass, and including the government. But that is an enormous, very abstract sort of perspective on the issue, and it's hard to grasp. And it's, I mean, most people, I would say most people don't quite really get what rights are about, and it's not really their fault. It's a hard issue. And there's a lot to grasp about that, and it's a long argument. But in effect is, you need to have principles that protect individuals so that they can function in the way that their nature and their lives and their flourishing requires. And if you don't do that, if you say, well, you know, you don't have the right to property. I mean, just take property. I mean, we just listened to a lecture on property. I mean, if you take the right to property, you don't have the right to earn or to own and dispose of the products of your own activities and your own efforts and your own work. I mean, to say that is that you would live by permission. You have to wait for somebody to say, it's okay, here's some stuff, and then you can eat it. But your life is never your own, and you're never in control. Morality always trumps economics. So if people think, well, yeah, capitalism is so much more efficient, it's so much less wasteful and so on, but it isn't moral. It's wrong. You're gone. I mean, you'll never win on capitalism. You'll never successfully defend capitalism because morality is more important. And everybody thinks that, and everybody believes it. I think rightly.
Everybody thinks that socialism is more moral.
Yeah, and then they think socialism is the moral system because morality is not about pursuing your self-interest, pursuing your own happiness, pursuing your own individual goals and success and flourishing. It's about sacrifice to the community. I mean, you're told from day one, most people are, that self-interest is bad, or they call it selfishness or whatever. That's bad. Pursuing your own values for your own self, that's bad. And the idea is really to give away. And if that's the case, then socialism is the proper moral system. If that's your ethical viewpoint. But if your viewpoint is quite different, and Ayn Rand is radically different. Morality is about selfishness. And it doesn't mean that you're predatory or something like that. It means that you're pursuing the values that actually, in fact, enrich and enhance and sustain your life. And that is the moral. It's not like, well, you got to do that, but then you got to be moral. That is the essence of what it means to be moral. The other thing is, the opposite approach is take the things that enrich and enhance and sustain human life and give them away. And telling that to every individual, that's what you ought to do. Find the stuff that makes human life go well and give it away. That's the essence of what morality is about. She calls that the morality of death. I mean, it's a strong statement, but this is the morality of death. And to implement that principle in society, which is what collectivism really amounts to, is let the people who can really function, that they can think, that they can produce the things that enhance and sustain human life, and let's shackle them to the rest of the people, and let's grab their stuff and hand it to the other people who aren't doing that or don't do it well. The OAC, it's an acronym for the Objectivist Academic Center. It's really one of the mission-critical programs at ARI. Because ARI, the Ayn Rand Institute, it's an educational nonprofit, and essentially what we do is we educate people about Ayn Rand's ideas and about these principles, of self-interest, of individualism, and so on. And there are many, many, many more people that need to be exposed to those ideas and to be prepared to think about them and to argue about them and to integrate them in their lives. And the Objectivist Academic Center plays a key role in that. So what we do is it's a distance learning program for college students and professionals around the world. We literally have people from around the world, from Norway, Sweden, Russia, Moldavia, wherever it is. I said Moldavia, Montenegro, but people coming in from all around the world. It's a 3-year program. The first year we deal with it's more or less a philosophy course where you're reading other major historical figures in philosophy in connection with Ayn Rand's thought as well, so that the students can get. They're not all coming from a philosophy background, so they can get a much wider perspective on what kinds of positions have been taken, how do the ideas, what are the philosophical issues out there, and how do they arise, and why are they important, and why it matters if you adopt one position rather than another. What does that look like? And partly to get the ideas that philosophy is a complicated subject, and that there are reasons why people disagree with your views, there are reasons why I disagree with other people's views, and there are arguments to be made. Introduce yourself to a different perspective. People tell you about that about education. You get exposed to many different perspectives, but expose yourself to a different kind of perspective. And I would think when it comes to reading Ayn Rand, read The Fountainhead, read Atlas Shrugged, something, because she's an excellent salesman for a different kind of perspective, a different way of looking at life. And in essence, anyone out there who who has a perspective that my life is my own and I want to live it. And there could be a lot of people that disagree with me. My family doesn't agree with me. That's not what I'm taught in schools. But damn it, it's my life. And I want to live it. And I want to be happy. And I want to seek out relationships that are meaningful and important to me. But it's about what I want. It's about my own personal happiness. And if you care about that, you need to get out of the kind of mindset that you've been raised in. Otherwise, there's no real escape from that. And so if you want to do that, I think the best way to do it is to read Ayn Rand's novels. I don't think there's a better way of doing that.